You open your eyes in a mud brick house outside Athens. 430 BCE. Your stomach hurts. Your fever won't break. Your mother sits beside you crying. She already buried two of your brothers before their first birthday. Now she thinks she'll bury you too. Welcome to ancient Greece, where half the children never see age 5, where a scraped knee can turn into a death sentence, and where the philosophers you read about in school never once wash their hands. This is why you wouldn't survive. Let's start with the odds stacked against you before you could even walk. Archaeologists studying burial sites across ancient Attica found that roughly 1 in 3 infants died before turning 1. Another third didn't make it past age 5. In Sparta, the situation was worse by design. Plutarch describes newborns brought before a council of elders. Weak or sickly infants were left exposed on Mount Tegetos to die. Historians still debate how often this actually happened, but the practice existed as accepted policy, not rumor. If you were born frail in Sparta, your life could end before it started, decided by strangers looking at your body for a few seconds. Say you survived infancy, disease was still waiting. In 430 BCE, a plague tore through Athens during the second year of the Peloponnesian War. Thucydides, who caught the disease himself and survived, described bodies piling in the streets faster than anyone could bury them. Modern researchers have proposed typhoid fever, though the exact pathogen remains debated. What's certain is the death toll. Somewhere between 75,000 and 100,000 people died, close to a quarter of the city's population. Doctors had no idea what caused it. Hippocrates and his followers believed illness came from an imbalance of 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. There was no germ theory, no antibiotics, no concept of contagion beyond avoiding the visibly sick. If you caught a serious infection, your treatment options were bloodletting, herbs, and prayer to Asclepius. Even a minor injury carried real risk. Without antiseptics, a simple cut could turn septic within days. Archaeological remains show evidence of trepanation, drilling holes into the skull, used to treat head injuries and even headaches. Survival rates are unclear, but the bone growth found around some trepanned skulls proves at least a few patients lived through the procedure. Physicians like Hippocrates did develop real techniques, setting bones, draining abscesses, observing patients closely. But without anesthesia beyond opium poppy extract, surgery meant being awake and held down while someone cut into you. Food security wasn't guaranteed either. The Greek diet centered on barley, olives, wine, and small amounts of fish or goat cheese. Meat was rare, usually reserved for religious festivals when animals were sacrificed and shared. Bad harvests meant real famine. Athens imported roughly half its grain from the Black Sea region by the 4th century BCE, and a disrupted shipping route could mean empty granaries within months. Malnutrition shows up clearly in skeletal remains. Stunted growth, enamel defects on teeth from childhood stress, signs of anemia. You weren't eating badly by choice, you were eating what survived to your table. Now, consider your social position because it decided almost everything about your daily life. In Athens during the classical period, historians estimate that enslaved people made up somewhere between 30 and 40% of the total population. If you were captured in war, born to an enslaved mother, or sold by your own family during hard times, you had no legal personhood. You could be beaten, sold, or used as forced labor in the silver mines at Laurion, where conditions were brutal enough that life expectancy for miners is thought to have been extremely short. Your labor built the temples tourists photograph today. Your name was never recorded. If you were born female and free, your options were still narrow. Athenian women couldn't vote, own significant property, or appear in court on their own behalf. Marriage typically happened around age 14 to a man in his late 20s or 30s, arranged by your father with little input from you. Xenophon's writings suggest a wife's expected role centered on managing the household and producing legitimate heirs. Childbirth itself carried serious risk. Without understanding of infection or safe intervention for complications, maternal mortality was high enough that dying in childbirth ranked among the leading causes of death for women of reproductive age. If you were a free male citizen, warfare eventually found you. Greek city-states fought constantly, and citizen soldiers, hoplites, provided their own armor and weapons. Battles were fought at close range in a phalanx formation, shields locked, spears extended, men pressed shoulder to shoulder against an identical wall of enemy soldiers. Wounds from this kind of fighting were catastrophic. Crushed limbs, punctured organs, and no reliable way to stop internal bleeding. The Battle of Delium in 424 BCE alone is estimated to have killed close to 1,000 Athenian hoplites in a single afternoon. If you lived in a city-state during this period, military service wasn't optional, and survival wasn't guaranteed. Even outside war and famine, daily hygiene worked against you. Most Greek cities had no sewage systems comparable to what Rome would later build. Waste was often dumped in streets or pits near living spaces. Lice, fleas, and intestinal parasites were common enough that ancient medical texts described treatments for them as routine. Bathing happened in shared public facilities or nearby rivers, not exactly effective against the bacteria breeding in crowded urban centers. Dental remains from the period show widespread tooth decay and abscesses, and without dentistry beyond extraction, a bad tooth could become a life-threatening infection. Add it all together, and the numbers are stark. Estimates place average life expectancy in ancient Greece somewhere between 25 and 35 years, dragged down heavily by infant and child mortality. If you survived past age 10, your odds improved considerably, but disease, childbirth, war, and infection still stalked every stage of life. You wouldn't have antibiotics for the infected cut. You wouldn't have anesthesia for the broken bone. You wouldn't have a vote if you were a woman, freedom if you were enslaved, or safety if you were a soldier in a shield wall. The marble ruins and philosophy we admire today were built on a daily reality most of us would not last a season inside.